So the thing that I also want to throw out to us, and I think it's part of this conversation, is what do you do when no one's looking? I tell people I used to have 7 white friends, and then I had to cut it down to just 4, because one of the things that I find painfully sad is when people constantly run into racist incidents and situations, they're in a position to push back and they don't. They know it's wrong ethically or whatever, or they're in these all-white spaces, and they believe in diversity, but they never challenge it. So my point and the question I raised part of this conversation is, what do we do when we're a person of color? When people push the bar, the envelope about other people of color, people who are oppressed, do we speak out? At the end of the day, folks, if we do nothing, then we become do-nothingers. So I think it's very important for us to ask that question of ourselves. What do we do when we know something and we know the water is running? Should we turn the tap off? So I'm going to pass it on to another person.
I think it's really important to get out of the theoretical framework and understand that our zip codes that we live in have impacts in our health disparities. They have impacts in our career choices, our career opportunities. That resume that's right underneath your name is your address, and it doesn't matter what comes after that. They see a certain kind of address, you don't get a call back. And so it's important to get out of the theoretical framework and know that these variables have very tangible effects on people's lives.
Okay, whoever.
So I do like. I still live in North Omaha my entire life. I got my North Side t-shirt on. I have lived almost all of my life east of 30th Street. Almost all of it except for 5 years in Northeast Omaha. I love living in Northeast Omaha. Absolutely love it. I love living around people who look like me and who are culturally compatible with me. I might grill in my front yard. I'm not saying black people do that, but my neighbors do. And it's so fun. I'm just telling you. I definitely play my music very, very loud and some other things. I do like living in Northeast Omaha, but I don't like that I live in a food desert. I don't like that my neighborhood is occupied by police. I don't like that. I don't like that it's pit bulls and Rottweilers running loose without a leash. I don't like poverty connected to people who look like me. I don't like that. And I don't like inferior schools because they are in my community. So, and I don't understand why black people, to Mr. Love's point, can't live around black people and love black people and be happy in black neighborhoods with added. Can we still have excellent schools in all black neighborhoods or predominantly black neighborhoods? Do we have to live in white neighborhoods, or do we have to have a mixed neighborhood or a gentrified neighborhood in order for our schools to be good? In order for my neighborhood, I live in Miller Park now. And when I first moved in Miller Park 23 years ago, it was predominantly black. And then it is, anytime you see white people walking pedigree dogs down your block. Yeah. And I have relatives in Detroit. This is going on all over the country. I have relatives in Detroit. In the worst parts of Detroit, you see the same thing. So it's not that it's just new. You see it in Chicago, you see it in LA, in Compton, in Atlanta, different places, but so that is the question, and it really kind of throws it back out there like it's always, how is it for you? It's like, okay, we make happiness out of it, but what if I did want to live in Elkhorn? Can I be happy living in Elkhorn? No. And can 10 other people that look like me or claim African American or have African in their ancestry, can they be happy living in Elkhorn? Must black people all be segregated here and then white people here and Latinos here and Asians here? Why does that have to be? And so again, that goes back to race and white supremacy, because black people we don't have the power to tell Latinos you can't live in our neighborhood. Only people that can really do that are whites. And that's historical.
Yeah, with respect to the comment about the food desert, it brings a big question about the conversation around economic development and business development in the city. There's probably 5 or 6 targets west of 120th Street, right? If you count them up, and Walmarts and everything like that, you don't see the same businesses when you go to other parts of the city, right? And that's something I don't think a question's ever been thrown at to a city official like that. So I think we need to start getting way more frank with how we talk about certain things in Omaha. And when it comes to Ajmal's point about calling people out, calling people in with respect to race and segregation, frankly, white people need to be talking more about it. It can't just be people of color leading the conversations on this, because so much of this is a white problem. And so that's something that I think Omaha just needs to wake up to, and I think the way it happens is just an increase in frequency. So basically bringing people to events like this who might not go to events like this, or breaking into churches or community centers or schools and having the same type of frankness and sort of bluntness about the subject that we have here. Because I think that's the only way change or a change in perspective can happen, is if that frequency amps up so that people can't kind of avoid it any longer.
Folks, we're conscious of time. We're right at that halfway point where we're going to throw it out to the audience. Before I do that, again, we want to let you have comments, feedback. So part of it was the panel to talk the first hour, and then we throw it out to the audience. Before we do that, I want to share one other thing. As a kid growing up, I was a fanatic about Richard Wright. And I always found it fascinating how these African Americans moved to Paris and France and so on. And I was never really a fan of James Baldwin. And then recently I just finished reading a 400-page book on James Baldwin and found out what he went through and just how brilliant he was. And he didn't even have a college degree. But what was fascinating is this biographer who wrote about him delineated things that I don't think anybody knew because they did their homework, they were close friends. And then I also had a chance to read this book. I went back and watched for the first time. Now here I'm teaching black studies every now and then. The debate that he had with William F. Buckley and Baldwin, and it was a classic. And my wife and I sitting there watching like, you got to be kidding. 55 years ago or so, this guy's throwing out this kind of light. It was like Malcolm reinvented, but he comes from a very literary point of view, and again, he grew up in Harlem and so on. And I recommend that book because I will say it was a transformation for me to see a lot of stuff that I did not know growing up in Omaha. And again, I was not familiar with his writings that much until recently. And I recommend that as you start to read these books about many of these folks who have come before us, there's some nuggets and diamonds in some of their writings and their speeches that can help transform us, because it's almost scary what they did and what they went through and how we're going through the same cycle. I do know we do have a condition, and I've diagnosed it, they call it Negro amnesia. It means we forget our history and our culture, or we develop this sense that we were the only generation that did what we did. And as you read Baldwin's writing and his allegiance to not only the diaspora of African folks, but in terms of how he circumvented many of the negative things he grew up in terms of poverty and so on, it becomes an inspiration. Again, Baldwin was not required reading in my high school literature or anywhere, but I will recommend that if you go and you pick a good book up and you read it, it will help answer some of these questions for you. So on that note, I'd like to throw this out to the audience if I can to get your reactions and feedback. I think there's a hand over here in the back. For some reason I got eyes in the back of my head.
30 seconds.
Okay, got you.
I don't need tonight. I just want to transition something. One is, how many of you, by show of hands, know the importance of the 2020 election?
Wait. All the hands going up. It's so free out here. What's it?
Hold on. The transition is, we have two candidates in the House for the United States Senate. One is Mr. Chris Janet. And the other one, I forgot her name, but it's something like Shelton. No, I'm just messing.
Look at my face. I'm like, Preston, don't do me. Alicia Shelton.
Good. So folks, we have the first question, and we got one here. So I'm going to try to raise your hand if you want to say some comment, and I'm going to try to keep track of who's next, okay?
Okay, my question is kind of multi-pronged. A couple of questions about education and one about the concept of gentrification. And that is, somewhere in the advertising for this event, I read somewhere where it said, why is it that Omaha has 5 separate school districts and other large cities only have 1? And so I was kind of curious about that and how that might fit into this discussion. And also, what impact is so-called open enrollment having on cultural diversity? And is it helping or not? Is it working? Is it working well? Is it increasing diversity considerably? And finally, with gentrification, you mentioned some of these new housing projects come up. And as I understand it, then realtors are not obligated by laws or other procedures to allow people of color or certain income levels to purchase or rent in these facilities? Or is this gentrification just another way of redlining in the 21st century?
Good, thank you.
That's a really good question, yes. Personally, I hadn't thought about that. But when you say that, it sounds like it makes sense to me. Because here's the thing. North Omaha community has totally changed. Particularly, let's say, 24th Street. And a lot of people now live out west. And they live out west, and as they're moving out west, black people, white people are moving down north. And so my neighborhood, my block, which was all black, I am now the only black person on my side of the street, which is amazing to me. It is absolutely amazing to me, just how that happened. And so now, of course, I get, we want to buy your house. Will you please sell your house, like all the time? So I think that gentrification, because it's always, to me, when I think about it, again, it goes back to white supremacy. It's whites decide where they want to live. And where they want to live, people of color can't live. So that's what I see growing up in Omaha, at least.
Just one response. Very good question, but it had 3 parts. But I'll respond along with you on the gentrification part of it. Is I'm saying no. And the reason I'm saying no is, at least my view of gentrification, is that there is an investment in your community that will have negative effects and displacement of the people. And so, technically, that's not gentrification when what you just said is happening. It might well be, but it is not the same. There is a big difference between. Yeah, that's right. That's cool. So,
Folks, I want to keep moving because I saw 3 hands jump before I, oh man, okay, back up here and then go back over here. Okay, man.
I am an inblank. I'm not originally from Omaha, but what I wanted to say was more of a conversation. As far as when I first came to Omaha, I received a job here and I was sent here. I never knew, and this is honest, that even blacks lived in Omaha. That's what I was told. Only thing I knew was Wild Kingdom. I'm from Ohio, which is also a very segregated city. I was told when I first when I came in on my job, I was told not to move to North Omaha. I was told to move out west, which made me feel like I was scared to go over in North Omaha. Being a black person, I was actually afraid. I had got a part-time job, which I did some supervised visitation. When I would go over Omaha, North Omaha, I made sure I was not over there after dark. And I'm African American. This is what is put out in some of the other cities other than Omaha, that it's very racist here.
Thank you for that comment. I appreciate it.
You have someone right here.
What? Wait.
Can I just tack you all real
Oh,
quick?
you want to tackle that real
quick?
Yeah, real quick now. Okay, real quick. Because I got to hand out outside.
You were told not to come into North Omaha. I think it's interesting. You alluded earlier, Ajmal, to the fact that unfortunately Creighton historically advised their students not to go north of Cummins. But I don't know how many of you know that the leadership at the Strategic Air Command historically told black airmen not to come to North Omaha. They would be subject to discipline if they were caught in North Omaha. And what has happened is that that mentality has continued, so that when black servicemen and their families come to and are stationed at the Strategic Air Command, they don't come to Omaha, period, but North Omaha, definitely not. If you see, that's where the military communities growing up, Bellevue and those surrounding areas, that's because the leadership at the Strategic Air Command said, when you see black people in Bellevue, they're there because that's where they had to live, by reason of the Strategic Air Command's.
Bert, before she gives up the mic, could you comment on the part of the question about the 5 school districts?
Elijah, make sure the tape is rolling there. I want to capture this one.
You know, first of all, you have to understand that there was a law on the books, Nebraska legislature. There was a law on the book that dated back to the late 19th century that said that any city of the metropolitan class had to have 1 school district. And I don't know if you'll remember, it would have been the gubernatorial election of 92, maybe, when Heinemann ran against Tom Osborne. That was at the time when there was a realization that that law was on the books, and there was a group of folks, myself included, who were advocating for enforcement of that law that said 1 city, 1 school district. And it led to the development of the Learning Community Council instead of 1 city, 1 school district. But you help me understand how in a city that you can have a school district that is completely surrounded by another school district. You know, it's one thing to talk about white flight that led to the development of the Millards and the Ralstons. Help me understand District 66, which is completely and totally surrounded by the Omaha Public Schools. And it was racism. It was designed for that purpose. It was intended for that purpose. And we never got to 1 city, 1 school district, which is why we have, it's not 5, ladies and gentlemen. In the greater metropolitan Omaha area, there are 11 school districts.
Thank you. And I saw your hand up here. I want to make sure. Wait, I got you. No, you're timing. Y'all got stuff.
I know.
Right here too.
I got come over there. Okay, we can hear that. Okay.
We were talking about assimilation earlier. I grew up, both my parents have college degrees. My grandpa has a college degree. And then my aunts and uncles have also been integral in Omaha development and Black studies, Black study program, all of those things. So assimilation for me was tied to success, almost, where it would have looked like the neighborhood I was going to live in, all those things were tied to me being able to go toe-to-toe with all my white friends. You know, if my parents drive a nice car, then I'm just as good as my white friends as well. But then it comes to the point where now where I'm older and I'm starting to be more aware of things. And I live in Elmwood Park now. That's the first house I wanted to buy. It was in Elmwood Park, and I had a family friend who's white who sold it to me through owner financing a couple years ago, or a year and a half ago. So that was like my goal. You know, I'm gonna live in a nice neighborhood. I'm gonna have a nice house. I'm gonna graduate from college. I'm gonna have all these things that my white friends and my white families have. The white families have. I went to Central High School. Most of my friends were white at the time. They all lived in Dundee. Every single one of them. I lived on Florence Boulevard. We had a large home. I have 5 siblings, but it wasn't Dundee. My parents weren't anesthesiologists. They did not drive. My family car was a Ford Windstar. It was not a Mercedes SUV. You know, so there was things that I aspired to, but it's the success that I reached, or in my brain what success was actually just assimilation. So now that I'm recognizing that, I'm like, how do we teach, because I work at Central Park, I run that at-risk youth after-school program, and how do we teach our children that being successful doesn't mean looking like a white person. Because with white supremacy, with white supremacy, like you were saying earlier, it's like, that's a lifestyle. That's a life that white people enjoy. They were saying that white people like to be comfortable. That's a white lifestyle. If I move into a white lifestyle, I'm never going to be happy. If I live in an all-white neighborhood now, and I'm thankfully great friends with one of my neighbors, but the other neighbors barely look at me. You know, I'm a 25-year-old black man that owns a home in their neighborhood. That's not a normal thing for them. So how do we teach our kids that assimilation is not what success looks like for black people?
I just think if we know history, and I think, if right, know your history, know your greatness, and one of the things that Black Studies does is it helps you understand that and navigate institutional racism. I was at a table talk event a couple of years ago, and there was a student. I have never done table talk without you. Oh. And one of the students in the breakout session, or the tables did the report out, he stood up and he did say, he was black, and he did say, it's very important to me that white people accept me. And that's an identity thing. It is, but it is a slave mentality. It comes from the plantation, and it's really not our fault. We're trying to, catch up and do and thrive and survive in a society that sits on us. It sits on us. And so, of course, especially when what you know is what you know. Of course you want to live in a nice neighborhood. I do too. I live in a nice neighborhood. But my nice neighborhood is occupied. And my house in Miller Park, maybe like your house in Florence, you could pick it up and put it in Dundee and add $300,000 to it. Yeah, so that is the thing. It's not, I shouldn't have to live, you shouldn't have to live in Dundee to live in a beautiful neighborhood, in a nice neighborhood, and you should be able to live in the neighborhood you want to live in, and it shouldn't be exclusive. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I like Dundee too.
We got about 5 more questions. Man, what's going on here? Y'all loving this conversation or what?
Yes. Hold on. Okay. She's had her hand up forever. Right here, no, she has.
Where at? Look at she pushing her hand down, y'all. Where's she at?
Here, stand up.
Oh, man, okay, I gotta go over here because y'all got that group pressure on me again. These little talk shows here, make me do some exercise.
But I'll just tie everything that I've been here. I hear and see myself in everything that has been said here. I'm from North Omaha. I was raised on 30th and Corby Street, right down the street. Once my mom figured out she got enough money to get out of the projects, that's North Corby Street. I went to McMillan, and then I went to Central. And once I got to Central, that's when I got my diversity. Most of the kids when I went to school were all black. Then I came here and graduated from UNO. I didn't even know how to speak proper English when I came to UNO. So all the words in the classroom, I'm thinking like I'm Googling things and looking things up in the dictionary just to be able to communicate with my professors here. Now it is, I'm here. I wanted to go to Howard University as well, but I have my daughter here who's 10. Now when she came to kindergarten, I graduated from UNO when she was 5. I sent her to Pecott Elementary. That was one of the worst mistakes ever. She was suspended on her second day of school for basically making someone get their hands off of them, a teacher who was trying to console her because she was crying. So she didn't know this lady. So I took her out of Pecott Elementary, sent her to Metalusa where it's more diverse. Now here we are, it's middle school time. I want her to go to Beveridge, but this is a problem in our community that I feel like I have to bring my daughter out of her area where kids look like her, because she came home and said, I don't want to be black, and that's why I took her out of Pecott. Missed that point, sorry. And so that's where I put her in Metalusa, where I went to elementary school. Now I'm a scholar, I have a minor in Black Studies, and so I have the opportunity to work in our community. I work for Big Brothers Big Sisters, where we get to work with a lot of people in the community, a lot of the white savior mentality comes through our agency, and we have to unpack that. We're working with adults who are coming to mentor children, who we want to not have the idea that white is better, but that's all these people know sometimes, not everyone, but we as staff, have to unpack those things and work in our community and things like that. Now, here I am, a young mother, having to try to pave the way for my daughter. And one thing that I recognize in our community here in Omaha, born and raised, is that the Black elite or the Black educated aren't grabbing our Black young youth. Like me, my age group, the 20s, born in 1990, 91, 95, and a little later, should be in this room, but they're not. And they don't, and I invited some here, and they were basically scared to come. This is not a place for them of comfort to learn these things. And when they are the ones who are at risk of all of these things, and younger, because they're raising these smaller children. Sorry, but that's just to conclude, because he's taking the mic from me.
Thank you for sharing.
Man, I can't get up on this conversation on here. We must have hit a jackpot here. Terry's pulling me. We gotta come back around here, y'all. I got y'all.
Everybody should know this is the birthplace of Malcolm X, and I feel as though this is a legacy that is here. Malcolm's family had to leave here because of the KKK chasing his family out of Omaha. That legacy is here and is still present in 2020.
So this is a good segue to your comment and your question, and I pose it to millennials in the room on the panel is, we have these conversations all the time in the Department of Black Studies, but I have to say, I believe Black Studies is the only place where we can have those conversations on campus. So how do you create those spaces with millennials to have these conversations, particularly, I'm sorry, tell me your name again? Nick, yes. Nick, I'm proud of you, and I don't even know you personally, but I'm very proud of you that you can have these open, candid conversations about the privilege that you grew up in, and how do you have those conversations with your peers, with your colleagues, and for other millennials in the room, because I see this all the time in the classroom where we create the space as a result of the content of our classes. But what happens after you leave? Like Jamal said, what are you doing when no one is watching? So we create it and we give you a grade for it, and you walk away with this wonderful feeling of things that I never knew that before. But what happens after you leave our classes?
Good question. That's all.
Yeah, your comment made me think of, some of you might know, I think it's Charles Blow, the columnist for the New York Times. He had this great tweet recently that said sometimes the silent racism is much more impactful than the loud racism, and I think that's where we need to be better, is when you hear a racist joke, or even maybe just an ignorant joke or an ignorant comment, not just laughing it off, or not just letting it kind of roll off your shoulders or moving it on. And it's super hard to do because it's hard to be confrontational. And I think it's even extra hard I think it's a Midwestern thing too. I think, East Coast people, they have no problem getting in your face about something, right? But in the Midwest, like Nebraska nice is the real thing here. So I think, so not being afraid to call people out and be confrontational in a way that's just trying to be helpful rather than in any way that would try to tear someone down, is kind of my way that I look at that.
I just had a really quick comment. I've had the benefit of growing up in North Omaha and moving out because food desert and not having access to services. I've worked in South Omaha, West Omaha, and on the reservation in Winnebago, Nebraska. What I have been able to identify with, I'm going back to the question the young man asked up here about assimilation, and as a mental health therapist, the best way to overcome assimilation is self-esteem and learning about your culture. So me going to an HBCU, I was fortunate to go to Xavier University of Louisiana. They're #1 in placing African Americans into med school and creating pharmacists. And I was the first person in my family to graduate with a bachelor's degree. I worked very hard to do so. That's when I went natural with my hair. That was not cool back then. I just want to let you know I was ordering products off the internet. However, I think we need to start by looking within. So going that step further and saying, yeah, that's not cool, making that comment, but we also have to teach people how to be proud of who they are.
Thank you.
I got so many questions and hands up. I'm gonna try to make as many as I can. We're gonna go.
I think it's, I think that, I guess I have two things. One thing is that when I graduated from college, I made it a point I studied social work, and one of the things that we talked about a lot at Creighton in the social work department is the white savior mentality. And not just the white savior mentality, I'm not sure it was ever specifically said as such, but it was definitely the idea of like, we're not going to go into a community and take what we think they need and bring it to them. We are going to go into a community and ask what they want, and then do our best to provide that if we can, or connect them to somebody who can provide that. And I think that the idea of going into something humbly and going into something with the idea that you're not, though it may be your mission to help people, you're not going to save somebody, and that's not why you are here on Earth, right? Like we're not here to do that. And so I think that like I am a big sister with big brothers, big sisters, and my little is half African American, half Native teenager, and she has a lot of cultural things that she's brought to light for me, and I think that the going into the experience of being a mentor and being a big has really been helpful for me in a humble way, and like to address the like as a millennial, like how am I having those conversations? I'm talking about my little, and I'm talking about the cool things that she's doing, and I'm talking about the cool conversations we're having, and bringing her experiences to my peers, and then being confrontational, right? Yeah, and then also just to state, just because I know the question was asked about the redlining, there's an incredible exhibit at the Union for Contemporary Art, which I've been to like 3 times, which I highly recommend. That's called Undesign the Redline.
Right outside.
You want a second?
I just wanted to address what Omaha said earlier about not doing anything when we see a problem. If we see a problem, and if we fail to address that problem, then we become part of that problem, okay?
Just an engagement strategy that's brought up at the church when we did Out of Omaha documentary was that documentary had not been shown west of 72nd Street. And so when I hear these rich conversations, how can we export a rich conversation west of 72nd? How can we get funding to get that documentary shown and to people to get a little uncomfortable? And then the second point, as far as white supremacy that Dr. Robinson spoke to, was every time Elkhorn subdivision is annexed into Omaha, then that's white supremacy. When you have a black candidate for mayor and and Omaha's not landlocked where they can continue to expand out west for a white subdivision to come in, that's just more votes that are now biased and they're uninformed. So that I agree, and that how do we approach this annexation policy, which is just for taxes? They say, oh, we'll have better roads, let's annex more of Elkhorn.
Good. I'm going to ride around this side and we'll come back around. Well, we got 30 minutes here, y'all, so don't leave.
Hello, everybody. My name is Asit Goswami. I am running for Douglas County Commissioner in District 3. If you all want to take this conversation past the theoretical into the political, I highly recommend you all take a look at the County Commissioner office and races that's happening. The vote is May 12th. So there's a number of candidates, myself in District 3, Roger Garcia in District 1 against Mike Boyle, Michael Young in District 5, Joe Giles in District 7. We are having a conversation at the county level. If you don't know what a county commissioner does, I highly recommend you all pay attention. The city of Omaha fills the county, and so when you hear Douglas County Commission business, that's Omaha politics. That board handles $500 million of taxpayer funds that go to a variety of issues that affect our personal everyday lives. including the Juvenile Justice Center that had no or limited community input. They also work with Ajamal, or actually hold back data from Ajamal. And so if you want candidates that are in the office that are part of this conversation already and are going to continue it once we get into office and are willing to work with great people like Ajamal, I highly recommend, again, you take a look at the County Commissioner's Office. One point that I have is, that's separate from the race, is that if you're looking for policies that are that are trying to correct the history of racism in our city, I highly recommend you all take a look at Omaha Missing Middle Housing Campaign. That takes a look at the history of, we want to change the zoning laws that haven't been changed since 1987. Those zoning laws are rooted in exclusionary zoning that has that racist history that's connected to redlining. So if you all know about redlining, then you all should learn about Omaha Missing Middle Housing Campaign. It was on the basis of this that the city of Minneapolis had a citywide conversation with white people about the history of their zoning laws. And it was an end to have conversations like this. And so good luck to you all, and check us out. Douglas County Commissioners, May 12th.
Stop for anybody. I'm trying to control this audience. I saw a hand over here. Okay, let's go over here. We gotta come back to the panel members, y'all.
I got a question. Well, I had a question for Dr. Robinson. But
Yeah, I can answer for it. I'm joking.
But I went to Omaha North High School, and I wrestled there, and I ended up coming to UNO wrestling before they dropped the program. In my first year, I felt really uneducated as a freshman coming into this environment. It was new to me. I didn't know how to write papers. I didn't know how to study. And luckily, I was a part of the wrestling team, so it was some support. But I know if I wasn't a part of the team, I would have just failed. And I know it's still a lot of people that's coming into this environment and dropping out and failing because they're not prepared for success. And I guess my question was, how can we build a bridge with the Black Studies Department to be inside the schools like North High more often so kids are prepared?
Oh, I saw that. Oh, man. That's our hand back here, but I saw some hands over here, too. Okay.
So I'm not trying to speak for the Black Studies Department or for Dr. Robinson, but one of the things we have done, particularly at North High School, and we are losing Mr. Haynes, as we know, since he's retiring. Very big shoes to fill. But we've been in conversations with Mr. Haynes and also at other schools. One of them is Northwest, because that's a social justice school. Also Nathan Hill, to bridge the gap between Black Studies, the way you said, so that they can be involved in the dual credit enrollment through Black Studies and also their school. They're doing it at a lot of other schools through the aviation program and political science and English and education. So we're trying to do that same thing through OPS so that the students that are in high school, juniors and seniors can also get dual credit and then transition into the Black Studies Department once they graduate from high school.
We're going to try to get one person at a time. We got about 4 people that spoke, so we'll come back. Let's real quick and go back.
I just have a quick question. I am not originally from here. I've only been here about 5 years. I'm from Illinois. I grew up in Chicago, but my last home is western suburbs of Chicago. I guess my question is, why do you think when people like me move here and then when they move there, that they say don't go to North Omaha? Why is that? I don't know. I mean, I'm Black and I'm proud, and I live in Bennington, so I don't know why.
Who stays that?
Like when you're looking for a place to live here, or you come here and they say, well, you don't want to go to North Omaha. I'm Black, and they tell me not to go to North Omaha like they did her.
Brandon's going to answer that question. You got that mic over there.
I lived in North Omaha for 1 year as a white person. One of the shocking things I learned was about the density of police coverage. I felt scared, not of the residents of North Omaha, but of this really oversaturated police presence. They're patrolling, they're looking for a reason to mess with you. And I got pulled over for having a headlight out, and the officer said, what are you doing here? My impression was, since I see almost only police vehicles after 11 p.m., that there is an unofficial curfew. That would be one reason I would warn people not to go to North Omaha. Trouble with the police is expensive and bad.
Thank you so much for everything. It's been a very fascinating set of panels and questions. I'm Adrian Petrescu. I wasn't born here. I came here as fast as I could. I was born in Romania. It took me many years to become a naturalized American. I live in Gifford Park. I'm counting in 7 houses, the 2 African Americans, 1 Ponca, 1 Hispanic, naturalized Americans, a couple of whites. Gifford Park is, I think, the most diverse place, and we chose to live there. There is this place called Yates. If you've seen the red signs, Save Yates, we are behind that. There's been this community center that was a school that was dismantled 20 years ago. And then we made a new school. But OPS tried to close it, even though it was a community center where everybody, regardless of race, color, ethnicity, where do they come from, would gather around and have community. It wasn't a church, it was just a community. We're trying to save that one. So we're fighting with OPS, with 11 other districts, from 10, OPS plus 1, plus 11. And we learned that OPS is not in the business of running community centers. They're only in the business of running schools. The way I know, having a child in college who speaks English as a third language, just as I do, is parents teach kids. If parents pass on to kids what they've known, that's kids that would be proud of themselves, their history, their own self. You know, I grew up in a country that was 1,000 years ago, a couple of thousand years ago, conquered by the Roman Empire. The Romans conquered everywhere, and they had this one thing: divide and conquer. Okay? I thank you for saying it isn't just black, it is Asian, it is Ponca, it is Native, it is New Americans, it is everybody. Let's not let us, all of us, be divided. Let's be one people who are proud to be a minority of one, each and every one of us. I happen to run for Nebraska State Board of Education District 4. So we solve those things. If you want a united Omaha education, if you want everybody to be heard in the state, in the legislature, to hear all of these things, I would like to hear more of what you say and what you want me to take to Lincoln on your behalf. Thank you.
I didn't know there was so many people in the office in this room tonight. I'm like shocked. There's at least 5, 6 people here. I saw you handing it from the garage.
All right.
Folks, we only have about 20 minutes left. I'm going to give the panel a chance to close down, so I'll just in time.
Take all 20 minutes.
You're not going to take out 20 minutes.
I really could, because there's so many topics that are really close to my heart. I think especially as I've entered year 30. You ask about millennials, you talk about the parents, and I think something that sounds like it's really resonating with me is that I was raised by very strong, like, African parents who made it an effort to, like, teach us about our culture and then teach us about the things that they felt that were important. But when you talk about why not live in North Omaha, I want to talk about it from a child's perspective. So we moved to Omaha when I was in 2nd grade. And I remember at the time watching, like, in Alabama, I remember watching Cops. Like, just like little clips. Not even like the full show, but I don't know if anyone remembers it, but Cops go and people would, they would be like over dramatic version of like things that happened. And I remember moving to Omaha, and we like live in East Omaha, kind of by like St. Cecilia area. And every time we would go further east and into North Omaha, I would notice how many police officers there were. And at the time, I remember being like absolutely terrified. And I remember my mom being like, what's wrong with you? Because my child assimilation of the show was that the only people I saw getting pulled over were black. And in the show, they never really described what happened, really. It was just like, we've been following you for 30 minutes and yada yada. So I just like noticed this oversense of like following or unsafety. And I think you talk about that a lot when you talk about what do we know about police? They're here to protect us. And so why do we need overprotecting in this specific area? I don't have the ability to abstract think as a child. I just know that this means I'm not safe. And so I specifically remember being at Albertsons and there was a police officer and my mom, like I saw him and I ducked and I started crying. And I was like, they're gonna take me to jail. And I like just remember just bawling. And she went over and she goes, I gotta stop this. She goes and gets the cop. He comes over and he's like, we're here to, protect you. We're not gonna do anything. And we had to have this conversation with the cop in that moment because my mom did not want me to be afraid of police officers for the rest of my life. But the thing is that we don't even realize that what we see comes with an energy, it comes with an emotion. Because if a small child can pick that up, you don't need to tell an adult, don't move to North Omaha, because you can feel it. You can feel the presence of that unsafety or whatnot. But there is a beautiful sense of community. And I really thank my mom. And, as I used to fight her a lot because that's just how I am, I am a little bit. Like, I'll make it quick. But she went out of her way to show me that culture, to make me not afraid of it, to go to this engagement, to see the culture, the beauty, the stores, go into this store, read this book, and that was a big part of it. So I think when we're talking about that connection, it doesn't start with just millennials, it starts with our young kids, and that esteem starts with our young kids, and that's all of our young kids.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about the issue of preparations.
Wait, hold it. That is the shortest question you've asked since I've known you all my life. I'm shocked. Hold on, give me back the mic. Wait, I'm running with the live mic here. Let me answer that question and I got it.
Yeah.
Well, the way to understand, excuse me, the trackness, but if you have a McDonald's, all these people over here work for McDonald's. All the people over here work for the Burger King. McDonald's pays $10 an hour. Burger King pays nothing. And so Burger King sells their hamburgers for half of what they sell because they don't have the labor costs. Are you with me so far? So sooner or later, they're going to be looking for reparations. And so this nation was built on free labor.
Yes.
On Burger King. No, on free labor. It was built on free labor. Cotton, rice, sugar, free, tobacco. And fortunes were made. And so back to 1619, I don't want to go too far, but back to 1619, we began slavery. Not indentured slavery. And so there were aspects of that that are still here. We can get into that discussion, such as education and health care and all of that. Because all of those things were immediately affected by slavery. Slaves weren't supposed to be allowed to read. And on and on and on. And mass incarceration. It has to, by the way, have you noticed that the prison systems are getting the prisoners to do real things, make real products in they pay them 15 cents an hour? Deja vu. It is maternity. Because all of that is, you've got to be aware of the first thing to understand the second thing. And watch out for privatization of our prison. So, the short answer, next time, is that reparation is a way to compensate a whole community for having given free labor. But what people get hung up on is how do you implement it. Don't worry about that. Just let's get agreement on the reparations and then bring in some good minds. We'll figure that out.
Yeah, we're getting ready to wind down. I'll give each panel member a chance to say something.
This is real fast on reparations. There's a really interesting conversation about reparations that's been taking place over the last few years around the College of Notre Dame. There was a point in the 19th century where the college was going bankrupt, and they had to raise money to buy their buildings and buy their land. And they had a slave auction to raise the money. And now there are reparations advocates that are at the table in kind of halfway serious negotiations with the college, looking at what would a reparations program look like? What would the dollar amount be? Who would get it? And they're hashing out, a plan. They're going to make a proposal. So that would be something to watch as a model for how these things might work.
May I take just 1 second to acknowledge another person, an important person in the audience who came in late. But I want to introduce you, for those of you who have not met him, Leo Lewis. Leo is the philanthropist. He might not be enough. He might not be worth introducing, but he's the executive director of the Malcolm X Foundation.
Thanks, President, for doing that. Great to see Leo here. So we're doing closing thoughts, so I guess I can only speak from the white perspective and the West Omaha perspective, like I've been doing tonight. And so I guess what I would say is two people for the audience members who are here who are like me or who come from sort of my background. Sorry, I kind of powered through that read too. Let me start over. Like I said, so I can only speak from my perspective as a white person, so that's sort of who I'm speaking to with what I'm about to say, is don't be afraid to have the conversation about race, and don't be afraid to maybe make someone a bit uncomfortable with it in your first couple interactions, and then to let them know that that discomfort is okay, that that's part of the process of learning and part of the process of education. And through those roadblocks is the only way that I think progress will happen. The second thing is pay attention to your local government elections and local government officials, because I think it's so easy for white people to only watch like cable news and to see what's happening with the presidency or seeing what's happening on national elections, because you don't have the luxury, you do have the luxury of being able to tune out the local stuff, because it doesn't, you don't have to pay attention to that because it might not, affect you as much. So, pay attention to things like state legislature, to your city council, to your county commissioners, things like that, because they might affect people who aren't like you, and that's very important. So.
Hello. Thank you, guys. I think education is super important. If you listen to how Nick is sounding and how his colleague is sounding, it's all due to education. Terrell brought out an excellent point about education and how he felt he wasn't academically prepared to compete at the level once he was able to go to college. I had that similar experience. I graduated from Northwest, and I was a 3.3 GPA student at Northwest, but when you put that education on a level of Creighton, you're not able to compete at all. at all. And so if you don't push through that, if you don't try to stick it out, it ends up being a manifest destiny of self-defeatism. And then you think that you're incompetent because you're black. And so I think there's so much things to unpack that we have to be vigilant, and we have to understand the effects of public policy and how it's affecting our kids and our self-esteem in our communities.
Thank you. Folks, we're going to make a couple of plugs here. One, we have an evaluation form we'd like you to fill out. Each time we do an event, we like to have people evaluate the form of the event. And also, if you wanted to participate in some of these other events, make sure you sign in on the sign-in sheet so we can have you on our mailing list and so on. But again, stay in contact with us to be able to do more of these activities. And as I said here earlier, we'd like to have more activities like this. There will be an event over at Clare Memorial Church on March the 23rd from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. So on Monday. And it's about faith, hope, and love. And it's talking about vote for the common good, wake up, speak up, and stand up. And again, we're trying to get people much more involved in the public policy arena as it is. And so this event is going to be very important. And you can find more information on our First United Methodist webpage, as well as we do have flyers and so on that's out there. So Monday, March the 23rd, 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at Clare Memorial Church, which is the address of 5544 Ames Avenue. So we'd like to have you join us. Folks, I'm going to have my last reading for the night, but also one of the things I'd like to say, and I think is very important, and I noticed that even here tonight, is that many people in the audience oftentimes don't have a chance to have these honest dialogues, or even to share their stories. And again, one of the things I try to be sensitive to is that people have a lot of stories to tell and experiences. And what I learned from the continent, particularly being in Botswana, is that your story becomes my story becomes your story. And that's how we're able to move on, because we become part of that community of sense. And so I encourage us to continue to build communities by engaging in these sometimes difficult conversations, but speak truth to justice and so on. And as we say, truth to power. We must begin to focus on that. So here's my last reading for the night. Nothing ever works out the way I want it to. Just do what you do and do it well. Stop worrying about what other people are doing or what they will say about what you're doing. Just do what you do to the best of your ability. You may never get an award or public recognition or 5 minutes on the evening news. Just do what you do because you love to do it. Some people may not like what you do or support what you do, but some people will like it and support it, and some will pay you to do it. Whether people like or agree with what you are doing is not the issue. The issue has to do with what you do. Just because you do it can make all the differences in the world. And the last line goes, I have something important to do. And may the force be with you.